backgrounder. Now, with us to discuss this issue, we would like to welcome our regular guest, Professor Abdulsalami Nasidi. He's a former Director General of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control. Professor Nasidi, delighted to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And also joining this conversation from our Sokoto Network Center, we would like to welcome Dr. Haruna Mshele. Dr. Mshele is chairman of the House Committee on COVID-19 and a former commissioner for health in Borno State. Pleasure to have you with us on the program this morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigerians.
And we're also being joined via Zoom by Professor Maurice Wu, and he's chairman, Imo State Task Force on COVID-19. Professor Iwu, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning.
All right, and just walking into the studio right now, we have the Dr. Mukhtar Mohammed. He's just joining us. He's head of Technical Secretariat, Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19. We really appreciate it. We just allow him to get settled, but he's already here in the studio. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Gisli.
All right. Let's begin the conversation with Professor Abdulsalami Nasidi, the former Director General of NCDC, and who, of course, has been involved in the corona issues since global reactions and measures were taken also nationally in containing it. Professor Nasidi, here we are, a new variant, it's said to have been discovered. It's called Omicron. This is coming on the heels of what we had earlier, Beta, Alpha, Gamma, and of course, Delta, I believe. Yes. So, what's your take on this new variant? Surprising or altogether not surprising?
Well, thank you for having me again, and good morning, Nigerians. I must say that, to say surprising would be an understatement. The warning signals we sent earlier that this could happen, that the Wuhan strain that caused the pandemic in China might not be the last, and that the virus is very capable of changing its coats, its colors, and it can surprise the world by actually, moving from one type, that is for the common people to understand what we mean by variant, into another type. That means the same virus can change in a different form and come with different guns, to shoot and overpower the enemy. So then secondly, definitely we, were worried that countries that will not have the capacity to protect themselves quickly, and countries that will have immune compromised population, large population, like with HIV/AIDS, with other disease, TB, etc., that can lead to weakened immunity, protection against diseases, can lead to the development of this type of new viruses. So that's why we had what you call the Alpha, the Beta, the Gamma, the Delta. Now we're having the Omicron. In fact, we are not sure if, before the end of maybe 2022, we don't have another variant again. But whether surprising or not surprising, our worry, and that's what we should be bothered, is that we hope any new one that comes, especially this new Omicron, will not come with deadly weapons than the previous ones.
All right, thank you, Dr. Nasidi. Professor Nasidi. Let's welcome again Dr. Mukhtar Mohammed, who is head of Technical Secretariat, Presidential Steering Committee, PSC. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning. It's my pleasure.
Now, when COVID emerged, the concern was for developing communities, developing economies. Indeed, there were predictions that more fatalities would be recorded in this part of the world, especially in African countries. Now we have Omicron, of which not much is known, and WHO has tagged it as a variant of concern. is there, should, should we be panicky about it in Nigeria?
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigerians. First of all, it is really an honor and privilege to share this podium with my professor, my senior colleague, a mentor who has achieved so many feats in terms of virology and public health in Nigeria. It's really a pleasure to do that. Back to your question, certainly with the emergence of COVID-19, there were fears and trepidation all over the world that developing countries may not be able to cope with this pandemic if it goes the way it was predicted to go. And this is not because of anything. It's largely because of our health system, our population, and also our economy. First, our health system. Our health system is weak. We do not have enough structures. We do not have enough manpower. We do not have enough equipment and resources. And any negative shift in balance in terms of more people attending to the hospital can overwhelm the system and run it down. We had a glimpse of that at the beginning of COVID when the medical healthcare workers were coming down with infection. And when there was panic in the medical world also regarding lack of equipment, lack of prevention gears in the facilities. Some doctors downed their tools, and we saw how quickly some of the tertiary hospitals started to become overwhelmed. Second, in our population. Because of the nature of our population, Nigeria is largely, or most developing countries really have younger population than the old people. And it was feared that the younger people are going to be, transmitting that infection to the older people. And because of lack of medication and other illnesses, the elder people are going to perish. That is second. The third is the economy. If you look at our economy, also it has not been stable, and we had a taste of it. During the lockdown, it was just for a short period initially with just a few cities, and we saw how quickly people became agitated. People who depend daily on their bread, could no longer get those services.
Bread and butter.
Well, even the basic bread, think of the vulcanizer, think of the person who has to go to the market, to put on her table and sell things before she can feed the family. Think about, the daily artisans who have to go to construction site, to go and earn what they need to eat that day or the next day. So we knew because of these three reasons that really most developing countries are going to suffer. They are not going to be stable, and it's really going to have a long-lasting impact on developing countries.
Has that scenario changed with the advent, with regards to Omicron?
So with Omicron, genotypically, or just looking at the what has been seen in the virus, there is source of concern because this virus, this mutation, has more mutations. It has more, there's a constellation of mutations than any other of the variants that have been identified earlier on. And because of that, theoretically, there is this fear that it can be more transmissible, it can cause more sickness and death, and it can quickly overrun all the other variants, if it transmits based on the mutations that are seen. However, up till now, evidence has not shown that it is actually like that. We have not recorded number of deaths, even in the Southern African province where it is dominant now. There has not been more hospitalizations or more deaths from Omicron. But again, we cannot quickly rush to that conclusion. We have to wait until it is fully evaluated, and then based on the evidence, we can now say whether it is more dangerous, to the population than the previous ones.
All right, thank you, Dr. Mukhtar. Let's bring in now Professor Morris Iwu, Professor Morris, of course, you've been our regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, especially as we have discussed issues around COVID-19. Now we are seeing this Omicron variant. There were others that were ticked off by Professor Nasidi. Help our viewers understand why there would appear to be so many mutations in so short a time. We're looking at 2 years since the discovery of the virus in Wuhan in China. And there was also, against that discovery, a global reaction that was, in a sense, unprecedented, including the development of the vaccines. Why then are we still having this kind of mutation that the WHO, of course, has now described as one of concern?
Yeah, good morning again. Just like Professor Nasidi earlier mentioned, the virus does mutate. But when you look at the science, we shouldn't be surprised that it is mutating so fast. When in Europe and the USA, they normally have their flu vaccines almost every year. Each variant each year is different from the year before. We should learn a lot from what happens in flu. I think the Omicron is not a surprise to me that it's come out. Well, one of the problems that is happening here now is that most people talk about South Africa. South Africa identified the variant, but it has been there. And there is evidence now coming up that actually they have been in Europe for some time. And so trying to link it to Africa and bringing a lot of socio-political issues now, I think is really unfortunate. They are now confusing the science with politics, and that is a very bad thing. For us in Imo State, last week we only had 125, we tested 126 people, only 15 positive. We are still hoping on NCDC for more guidelines as the information on the disease becomes better known. But right now, what we are focusing on is to tell our people to obey those non-pharmaceutical guidelines. They should wear their mask. They should be able to clean their hands and wash their hands and use sanitizer when possible. But what is happening that in the rural areas particularly, people are not obeying those rules any longer. So we are trying to reactivate all the measures that we had before and tell them that the hurricane is not yet over, that people should obey those rules and then abide by the NCDC guidelines. And luckily, there are non-toll lines that they can call, both nationally and locally, to get help. So far, things are looking promising. But when again you look at the report from South Africa itself, the symptoms are milder than normal. They have not reported any known deaths from Omicron. So the reaction is, frankly, it is surprising. They know very well, the scientists know very well, that these viruses, particularly the coronaviruses, they do change their forms, they do mutate, they do change their types from year to year. It happens with the flu. So I'm totally surprised that now it is being taken as something from the moon, and people are now panicking and trying to enforce travel bans and so on. Yet it is important to take precautions for the unknown. But I think the reaction is far, far, far unscientific. It's not based on any known science at all. We know that the coronaviruses mutate. We know that South Africans identified it. Does not mean that it originated from South Africa. It is not the same thing as what happened in China. The South Africans mainly did a favor to science by being able to identify that that particular variant exists. Right now, they're now paying the price. And now Nigeria is also banned from going to Canada and so on. So we can see that there is a total confusion here, that we are mixing science with politics. And that's really a very bad mix. Thank you.
Prof, let me also stay with you. Although there's been no record of death from Omicron COVID yet, but a good number of those who have come down with the variant, the new variant, in different parts, of the world, are those who we hear have been fully vaccinated. Is there anything we're learning from that?
Back to what we said earlier, it is the same story. Vaccine for viruses, as I mentioned earlier, when you look at what happened to flu vaccine, they normally mix the dosage and the types and what get into that. Professor Nasidi will know that better than I do because he's been in this particular part of the project for a longer time. What just happened is that because that the virus on its own mutates so rapidly, every year the companies that make the flu vaccine have to go back to their drawing board, remix it, and send it out. So that you are vaccinated does not mean that you are totally immune from having the virus coming in. That is normal. It is. I'm totally surprised. Those who are vaccinated should not feel complacent. You should wear your mask. You should take all the precautions because the new virus is totally different from what you had before. They may be the same family, they may even be the same genus, but they are different. And that's what happened with flu. In science, we learn from what we know. What we should do is to lock on to what we know best. And what we are doing in Imo State is to focus on those vulnerable groups, the older people. 2 days ago, we did bring out some palliatives, products that can help strengthen the immune system. And that is the way to go. And these are particularly those who are 60 years and older, those who have HIV, people who are vulnerable to such attack. And luckily for us, the NCDC have brought out detailed guidelines, which more or less tells us the same thing we are doing. But where we are frightened, believe me, is because of the fact that this is Christmas season. A lot of our people will be coming home from Europe, from the US. We are more threatened by people coming from Europe and US than people coming from South Africa because they will come back with even strains that we don't know about. And so what we are trying to tell people that please, you should try to avoid crowds as much as possible. You should not have to think that this is normal Christmas season. Everybody that is coming from abroad should be treated with some kind of distance. It is not important that we start having people locked up and so on, but it is very important that we, particularly the older people, should avoid social gatherings and should wear their mask at all times. It doesn't matter whether other people are not wearing masks. You should save yourself. You should protect your own life. And then if other people don't want to wear masks, that's their business. You should maintain social distance. And the NCDC did a good job by bringing out those guidelines again, trying to remind us that these things can be avoided, these things can be prevented. And as I said, other states can also try to have immune fortification therapy so that their citizens, particularly the older ones, are protected and strengthened against this particular new virus. I don't think there's anything new here. It is normal in science of viruses that they mutate. And for us to believe and pretend that we are taking on our ways, I think that is really ingenious on the part of the British and on the part of Europeans and on the part of the Americans, because we know and they know that even in their countries, the flu vaccines, they change them every year. They have to take new vaccines. And this is what is going to happen in this particular case. Thank you.
All right, Professor Morris, well, thank you very much there for your comments as well as advisory to the people of Imo State. And I believe that other Nigerians who are also watching will respond positively to the pieces of advice that you have dropped. We'll come back to you later on in the course of the conversation. Let's go over now to our Sokoto Network Center, where we earlier introduced Dr. Haruna Mshelia, who is chairman of the House Committee on COVID-19. Dr. Mshelia, the honorable member of the House, tell us what your take is on the new variant, but also against the backdrop of the following. Did we drop our guard rather too soon as a country?
Well, thank you very much. Before I comment on the new variant and what our concerns should be, I want to totally concur with what Professor Morris Iwu has said. In fact, South Africa should be commended rather than punished for what they have done. Because like he rightly said, the Omicron must have been around for quite some time, but they were the ones that discovered it. Well, my advice to Nigerians is that please, all these non-pharmaceutical measures should be maintained properly so that we protect ourselves. You see, people talk about human rights. Your rights stops where somebody else's begins. And for somebody who thinks that the measures taken by the government from preventing people from entering their offices if they don't have their vaccination cards or at least a negative test is to protect others that have done so. Because you are being properly vaccinated does not mean you can't be infected. And there are people with underlying medical conditions that are still vulnerable, even if they are vaccinated to this disease. So I want to commend the federal government for that step. And I think during the course of your discussions earlier on, I've been here for almost an hour now, and I heard when you particularly who asked me this question said that people should not be carrying cards around. That is a simple thing. You can even snap your card on your phone with that computer mark on it. And whoever is screening, once they put their simple Android phone on that mark with their camera, it will give the details of what is on that card. Your name, your age, when you had your first vaccination, your second vaccination. So people should learn to just snap the card, the front card that has the computer mark, and go anywhere with it. When I went abroad recently, I had my card on my phone, and anywhere I went, when I showed them the photo of my card, they scanned it, and they have all the information that they need on the card. The other thing is, I want to commend the federal government, the Presidential Steering Committee, for a job well done, because honestly they have tried. And I want to appeal to Nigerians. Through my colleagues, we are all representing different constituencies. We should continue to enlighten our people, to continue to practice the non-pharmaceutical measures of wearing our nose masks and washing hands, using sanitizers, not going into crowded places, and so on. But the game changer is the vaccination. We are aware that all the 4 different vaccines are available in Nigeria. The Oxford-Zeneca that first came in, we still have more in store for people to go and have it free. We have Pfizer, we have Moderna, we have Johnson & Johnson. Once you are fully vaccinated, even if you get infected, you are unlikely to develop the disease, and that will mean you will be safe. We should all remember that when the common cold flu started in 1918, millions of people died. But now when you have flu, nobody panics. Nobody panics at all, because the mutated versions that we have around now are weak. They don't really kill people as such. And we are hoping and praying that the same thing will happen in the case of Omicron or COVID-19. All the things we are hearing now is just to frighten people. Otherwise, the Omicron, not much is known. Scientists are working frantically to find out whether it is more infectious, whether it is more virulent, and so on. But we should not assume that automatically it will be more virulent. The chances, like Professor Morris you mentioned, nobody has died of Omicron yet. So please, people should not panic, but we should continue to follow the normal rules of using the non-pharmaceutical measures to protect ourselves and protect our loved ones. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Haruna Mshelia, for your comments. I need to clarify what I said during the course of our newspaper review. I did not say that people should not have on their persons their vaccination cards. What I said was that assuming you find it a bit cumbersome or you don't have it in your wallet or otherwise, could the notification you received when you got your vaccination, when you took your first vaccination, suffice? And I cited the example of what I have on my phone. The message came from the Primary Healthcare Development Agency indicating my vaccination code and all kinds of things that are on the phone. Not that don't go about with your card. If you find it convenient to go about with your card, why not? But if you also have it on your phone, would that suffice? That was the point I made. Additionally, you have also assisted us now in saying, look, you can actually take a photograph of the chip on the card, and then let that, of course, be a pass for you at the various offices that you will get into. But Claire?
Yes, I thought the Dr. Mukhtar Mohammed should also help us to clear this, because he's the head of the Technical Secretariat Steering Committee. What should be the mode of verification for civil servants when they go to their offices?
So by the announcement that was made, starting from yesterday, all federal workers are required to show evidence of vaccination before they have access to their offices. And as you rightly mentioned and corroborated by Professor Maurice Iwu, you can show the evidence as a card, the normal vaccine card that is being provided by NPHCDA. It will be physically inspected, and it will be scanned, and it will show that it is genuine. Secondly, for ease of movement, one can snap the QR code on your phone, and anyone who is checking can also just scan it with the QR code scanner, and it will show exactly all the information that is required. So those two ways actually suffice, and I think people should not feel they are overburdened, by that request. And once you do it, you get used to it. In many places now outside Nigeria, it's a regular requirement. You go into the restaurant, you have to scan your QR code for vaccination. It shows you are vaccinated, you are allowed to enter. It's as fast as just dropping sanitizer on your hands.
Okay, that's some good information there as to the other way of getting around it. But I hope the information has also been passed to the security guards, who are the first line to say, look, show me your card. If you don't have card, they say it's not this one or the photo that I want to see, it's the card I want to see. The way things can be sometimes.
Yes, yeah. I want to stay with Professor Nasidi, because of the points that have been raised about the non-fatality, of Omicron COVID. The people who have come down with it, are recovering, are doing well according to reports and all that, basically because they have been initially vaccinated, fully vaccinated. So in view of that, should vaccination now for COVID-19 be made mandate across board?
Well, first and foremost, I would like to say that, we should ask the question, why is the world all of a sudden worried about Omicron? You understand what I'm trying to say? If it is mild and it doesn't cause severe disease and it doesn't kill, or it hasn't killed anyone yet, but why is the world so worried? Particularly the developed countries, that they have the wherewithal to fight such a, enemy. So one, the disease, came out very surprisingly, affecting mostly younger people, unlike the other strains or variants. Am I right? Secondly, it affected also those who are fully vaccinated. So it affected unvaccinated and vaccinated. So, and the severity of the disease in both was similar. So there was no huge difference between those who are unvaccinated that got the virus and those who are vaccinated. And in this case, they regarded even those who received the vaccine, the first dose, in the group that is as unvaccinated, because you have to be fully vaccinated before they will say you are protected. Then the third one is highly transmissible. It's jumping from one person to the other, faster than all the other known variants. So that's we had what we call this R0. That is the formula they use to know how a disease or a virus can be transmitted from one person to the other. For instance, if I came in here now and I'm infected, and we have how many of us? About 8 of us here. Before I go out, I transmit to all of you. That means, yes, that means the virus is having this ratio very high, very high. Then the third point is the fact that, unfortunately, as we are talking, in this part of the world in particular, where the virus is supported to have been reported first, whether it is originating from South Africa or not, for now, that's not the worry of the world. The worry of the world is that it is reported from part of the region of the world, part of the world that is lowest immunized. Our immunization coverage, to say fully immunized Africans, so far in the world is less than 5%. So it's very worrying. That means susceptible population, people that can catch the disease and for it to multiply quickly, is very high here. Take countries in Europe, 60%, 80% immunized, but they are still having even the Delta. The Delta has not gone yet. If you remember, before they reported the Omicron, in Germany, in many other big economies, you know, there is another fourth wave, fifth wave of Delta coming. Winter is coming. You know, so things that will reduce human immunity are coming. We, part of this, the world, Harmattan is coming. So, you know, if you don't, you know, take this seriously, you might be shocked. One, it might defy your defense mechanisms. You are vaccinated, you think you are fully vaccinated, you are free, you don't wear mask, you don't wear this. You know, you could be taken by surprise. That virus can change and become more deadlier. If you remember when Delta came, they were reporting it in Southeast Asia and others, and they were just, oh, it will not be as bad as Gamma, as Beta. When it changed, people started dropping dead in many countries, we saw, by the same virus. So if you see, you know, a very strong giant afraid of a mice, and you think you can stumble on the mice, you don't take care, you might be shocked. So that's why the world does not want to do this. The other point is that, you know, if it happens, let's say, and then we're overwhelmed on the African continent, as Dr. Mutar has mentioned, what do they call it? Our ability to respond quickly. The shock absorber for our health system is weak. It will affect other public health interventions very quickly. So you can see so many other points that will make us, I don't say we should panic. We cannot panic, but we should be worried. We should be highly worried, particularly our governments. Level of response should be higher. It can't be the same again. You can say, oh, don't worry, it's not very infectious for now. This and what tomorrow if it comes? Those who have it are now really dropping and dying and so on and so forth. So we should be worried, particularly the government. The government should be more worried because, one, if it keeps spreading, all our economy, they will block us. Many African countries will be, you know. So look at Israel. They said no country is coming, at least for 2 weeks. What others did not do, and that's why we in Africa are worried and angry, and that they can't give a blanket ban. And they should have even given it as a temporary measure. If they say temporary, we will have not been worried, and so on and so forth. But that's not our problem now. That's their problem. Our problem is how do we protect our own population?
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Are these not enough, you know, worrisome points to now activate a national, you know, mandate for the vaccination?
Yeah. So that's why I'm coming that one, before you activate such a national mandate for vaccination, you must have enough vaccine to give everybody. You cannot say everybody must be immunized, and meanwhile you don't have enough vaccine for everybody. You know, the Bendel Edo State governor did very well. He initiated that every civil servant, he initiated all this and so on. So, but unfortunately that time, I was sitting in my parlor and laughing. I said, but he doesn't have enough vaccines. It's a good initiative. You know, make it mandatory, that's the only way out. Secondly, the hesitancy. It's not easy, it's easy, as some people say, it might be easy to convert somebody to a particular religion, you know, and but it's not easy for you to make him to actually, you know, adhere to the tenets of that religion fully. So that's our major problem. This vaccine hesitancy, unfortunately, in the African continent, what is being recorded is that those who are actually refusing the vaccines are the educated ones. Unlike polio and others, where the uneducated, the rural, those who have been convinced by the decent one, people reject it. But now, the danger is that, you know, if this strain, you know, really becomes a dangerous one, and there are vaccines around, even if you make it mandatory, and you have not convinced the people to take it, it's a big problem. The last point on that, some countries were saying, we shall come to issue of vaccine and availability also. But what is worrying now, in this state that we are, some countries in Africa that were even donated vaccines could not use it because they don't have money for the syringe enough. So having a vaccine is not the same as having it in the arm. And some countries are now destroying vaccines donated to them that are already expiring in Africa. That's the problem.
Wow, that's worrisome, Professor Nasidi. I'll just let's bring in Dr. Mukhtar one more time. Dr. Mukhtar, I mean, what has been our actual national experience in recent months? I'm asking because in urban areas, in semi-urban areas, it looks like Nigerians, dropped their guard a long time ago. Uh, some complacency already set in amongst those who are fully vaccinated, and those who also skip the vaccines are telling you that, corona has gone and they have not seen dead bodies on the streets. And sometimes comparisons are made between fatalities arising from cholera this year and the number of fatalities that we have had in COVID-19 since 2020.
Well, that is true. There are many factors responsible for this, and one cannot say really for sure that one particular reason is why we have observed that complacency. If you compare awareness and knowledge of people, it has risen over time. We are doing polls to monitor knowledge of people about COVID-19, whether they are aware of the symptoms. That has persistently increased from the big cities to the rural communities. Many people now are aware that coronavirus exists, and they know that there are symptoms and that people can be hospitalized or people can die from it. But translating that knowledge into behavior is another thing altogether. Even people who initially were adherent to wearing the mask, refusing to go into crowds, there is fatigue, that sets in. So people get tired easily. So from time to time, it's important that people get reminded about this effort, and it is something that, the human factor. You've done it for 6 months, you've done it for 1 year, you really want to rest. Even some of us that wear the mask all the time, there are times you want to breathe out. You have to come out, go in the open air, remove your mask, and just relax a little. So definitely there is fatigue. Secondly, also, there is what you mentioned, the issues of we are not seeing mortality on the streets. We are not seeing what has happened in India or Germany or Spain, and that maybe the pandemic is actually over. Not only in Nigeria, but I think globally also there is that trend that people are tired. We saw here the NSAS protest, which many people attribute to the lockdown. In Europe, where there are stricter observance, we've also seen some kind of repulsion from the public, resistance, and so on and so forth. So on the vaccine, vaccine really certainly is the sure way to go to prevent yourself. But again, we still don't know how often you need to do the vaccines. Initially, based on the data provided by the manufacturing companies, some vaccines are 2 doses, some are just 1 dose. But then after 6 months or 8 months, you realize that your immunity wanes down. If you measure your level of antibody, that's your protection against the virus, you realize that it goes down. In Nigeria, we're not doing that routinely. And therefore, maybe after the first dose, the second dose, we may still need booster doses. And after the booster doses, still we don't know how long will it take. There will be maybe that level when after you have taken certain number of doses, perhaps maybe your immunity can stabilize at levels that are efficient or sufficient enough, to combat the virus. But again, the virus mutates again. So there are many unknowns and there are many factors. And certainly, we need some anthropologists to start telling us, the link between human behavior, and science and what is going on. But for now, the method is simple. The message is simple. Let us be consistent. With all these threats and fears that are seen, people have to brave up and just continue to, continue wearing your mask and observing the social distances.
Okay, thank you. Professor Iwu, when COVID came, of course, we quickly set up a very, what has been described as a very robust intervention structure. But in most parts of the country, that structure has either been collapsed or even dismantled. With Omicron now, do we need to, reactivate, some of those structures Again, we don't know how much of testing is being done now. Do we need to again, sensitize, on the need for more testing to be done?
Yes, I think so. What has happened that there has been some disbelief. We lost the confidence of the masses. We told them, we frightened them at the beginning, the same fear factor. And one danger with fear factor is that when people see that the fear factor is not based on reality, things that they can see, they tend to resist it. The West, that's the Western world, predicted that we are going to drop dead, that Africa, that we had a very weak health system. The same kind of argument has been now made about the new variant. And when people didn't see those fears that they had expressed come down, then they started being resistant. I think we should come up clean to our people. We don't have to do things because the West is saying so. For example, it is difficult to convince people about the mass vaccination simply because if you are vaccinated, you are not protected from having the virus. If you are vaccinated, you are not protected from transmitting it to another person. So we have to come up with better communication skills to be able to tell them why it is in their own personal interest for them to take the vaccine so that they can be able to protect themselves. So what is happening now is that we believe that hurricane was over when it was not over because we had a very poor communication system. And that was what we tried to make the point in the rural areas. They are resisting it very seriously. In fact, if you go to some villages, they laugh at you if they see you wearing masks. So we have to find better ways to communicate this whole issue, that it is a disease that is virus-borne, that you can transmit from one person to the other, and particularly those who are older, people who have immune-compromised systems, and people who, for one reason or the other, are on some medications and have some existing illnesses. And if we can then narrow these things down to them, we'll be able to communicate better because nobody wants to die and people will be able to obey what we are saying. But right now, what is happening is the fact that they're resisting the most of the policy issues are not based on science at all. I just gave the vaccine example as one case in point. We have not been able to translate what we know to the masses in a language that people will be able to understand. So those systems that we had before, they were not brought down. We still have the NCDs, we still have the National Commission and all that. We should be able to strengthen them and communicate better. And the state governments have a duty here to do, to be able to communicate to our people. There's something we are not getting right. I don't know how best to do it, but we should go ask people who are in mass communication. There must be a better way of telling our people what is happening so that we can protect ourselves. And also there's some sense of pride. We have done well. Nigeria particularly, their government did very well. We should be able to transmit that we have done well. Let us do it again. Let us do better. Rather than this whole fear factor. I don't think it will work that way. Let us agree that Africa has done better than the West. Africa did better than Europe. Africa did better than US. We should hammer that down so that let us protect ourselves and our people with their sense of pride will kick in and we'll be able to beat this virus like we have beaten it before. We didn't die as they say we are going to die. And I don't think we'll die this time again as they are fearing that because Africa will have very weak health system. But we have some resilience in our own system, which has also worked.
All right, Professor Morrissey, well, thank you very much there for the points you've raised. I mean, you've talked about the issues around risk communication and how effective that has been in all of this. But we do know that, of course, last year and to some extent parts of this year, there was intense disinformation, if not outright misinformation, spread through the social media about coronavirus vaccination, and that also led to a great deal of hesitancy. But the core points that you have raised are noted, and I'm just wondering, Dr. Haruna Michela, well, one point that keeps popping up, and I've had calls to also raise it here on Good Morning Nigeria. What is it that has protected Africa, more particularly Nigeria, from succumbing to the doomsday forecast as to the ravages of coronavirus on the continent and in the country? I mean, if you look at the horrendous numbers out of Brazil, out of the US, out of Germany, Italy, Spain, and even the UK with even more established healthcare systems, how do we explain it? I mean, our old people here were not dropping dead, even if they were dropping dead in advanced countries. and Nigerians are still strong. Could that also now have informed the hesitancy, if not outright, if you like, obstinacy of certain persons even in complying with the non-pharmaceutical regulations?
Thank you very much. This is a very, very good question. If I can tell you, actually, environmental factors and certain genetic factors play a role in diseases in human beings generally. I can tell you that the pattern of diseases in, say, Nigeria or Africa generally, and if you go to Europe, the patterns of diseases are different. You go to Europe, for example, you find that a whole hospital, a third of the beds are occupied by people with arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, systemic lupus, erythematosus, and so on. You don't find these diseases in Nigeria or in the tropical zones. Why? It's a very big question to answer. While here we are, compounded with infectious diseases like malaria, pneumonia, diarrhea, and so on, their pattern of diseases are different. My feeling is that it's not different with the coronavirus. The way Africans or people living in tropical regions react or interact with this virus is different from those living in temperate climates. Maybe there are some genetic factors that affect that. So can I say we are lucky? Maybe our environmental factors are in our favor, and that is why the doomsday story they talked about did not come to pass. However, we should not let our guards down, because we have seen so many prominent people, important people die of COVID in Nigeria and some African countries. So we should continue to follow science, we should believe science, and practice what we should. Now, the issue that Professor Morris, you just mentioned regarding our communication skills should change. There is one lacuna that I have noticed. We have neglected a very, very important segment of social interaction in Nigeria, and they are the traditional and religious leaders. My feeling is that a lot of resources should be pumped in that direction. This group of people should be brought at both national, zonal, state, and local levels to be educated properly, because the common people listen to them better than the enlightened people. How many people have sophisticated handsets to look at social media, or even have televisions in their houses? And even if they have a television, they may not have power. But if you talk through these religious and traditional leaders, within a short time, all the people will have an idea. And if we are able to convince this group of people to follow the science as it were, believe me, most of the problem will be solved within a short time. So I will ask NCDC, National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, to look in that direction. NOAA also, they should pay more attention to the religious and traditional leaders. Let them get them on their side, let them understand the dynamics, and believe me, most of the common people will fall in line. We saw what happened with polio. It took us a long time to get rid of polio because of, some false, narratives that were spread in the community. And until we got the religious and traditional leaders on our side, these people refused to cooperate. But once we got them on our side, they started cooperating, and we have eradicated polio. It will be the same with COVID. Let's get the traditional and religious leaders on board. Let's train them, let's teach them, and they will reach out to the common people. Thank you.
Dr. Haruna Mshelia, thank you. It's also a question that I would like other guests in the studio to speak to. Of course, Professor Morris Iwu and Professor Nashidi and Dr. Mohammed, when we come back from this short break.
That is the black swan of the century has actually hit the whole world very hard, even the strongest of economies, and Nigeria was not spared. But due to the proactive stance and steps that the president has taken, we've been able to come out quickly The president has consistently said we must invest in infrastructure, even as we're investing in human capital, that we must invest in infrastructure, because at the end of the day, that is what will bring about a sustainable economic growth. So the president has given us our directive. He has said you must make sure you pay salaries and pay pensions, but you also make sure that the critical projects of roads, railway, airports, bridges, major infrastructure that are meant to drive the growth of the economy, that we consistently invest in them, even if we have to continue to borrow to do so.
This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Finally, the hero of Nigeria's democracy has arrived. He shall usher us into a new phase of development, peace, and prosperity. He is the father of the new Nigeria, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR. Welcome to another season of giving Nigerians hope yet again. We are sure of a great future for both ourselves and generations yet unborn. We look forward to your leading us as a nation into our manifest destiny. Though the challenges against us as a people are many, we know that your leadership shall set us on the right path to our greatness. A new dawn beckons on us all, and having you as our president is a precursor to this. Thank you for believing in Nigeria. This message is from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
Southampton will look to bounce back from their thrashing at Anfield when they welcome the Seagulls to St Mary's this Saturday. It's Southampton versus Brighton and Hove Albion on the Premier League Live, showing on the network service of the NTA from 3:30 p.m. The Premier League Live is brought to you by Baba Ijebu, empowered by Integral.
Okay, welcome back. You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria, and we're looking at the variant of concern, that's Omicron COVID-19. And we still have our guests here in the studio. But let me return my question to Professor Maurice Uwu. The same question Kingsley asked, but I will modify it, in a way that suits my question. I'm wondering, is there a sense in which some of the traditional medicines or herbs, concoctions that we consume, have also helped in saving us from the doomsday prediction of the West?
Yes, please. Thank you very much. I think that is the key. That's the crux of the matter. There are three ways these viruses can be contained. One is to prevent it from coming into the body in the first place. The second is the treatment modality, the vaccines and all that. But the third, and perhaps more important, is the whole issue of the immune system. If you have an enhanced immune support, you are likely to be able to withstand the virus. To my mind, and from my training, what is happening here is the fact that Africa, over the years, had a very highly sophisticated nutrient system that has helped it to build, helped us to build very strong immune support system. And what we are doing essentially is to be able to have those immune support system enhanced by people taking their natural food substances and so on. You remember that we did have a product that we are testing at the University of Lagos for COVID. It was based entirely on plants. And then what is happening there, that from their data, it is obvious that the drug does work. And I'm sure that so many other little things, smaller things, our vitamins, our plants, but more importantly, our food system is more sophisticated than what they have in the West. Don't you also forget that most of them out there in the West, that what they eat most times are actually junk food. I forget that the poor Africans that we are very nutrition bad and all that. All those things to me are just a way of always trying to put us down. We have a better system than they do. Our people are more robust in terms of what they eat. And what also things that is happening, those who live in the villages who eat natural food substances tend to do better than those of us in the cities. And what is also happening also that even age that is affecting those in the big cities don't seem to affect those in the rural areas. So something is given there. But there is also a logic which is people are pursuing. Some linkage between malaria, parasite infection, and COVID-19 survival. That point has been made over and over. And luckily for us, we now realize that a particular drug used for treatment of malaria, which is called artemisinin, is being tested here in Nigeria as a possible treatment for COVID-19. So taking all that into consideration, our weather, everything, we are totally different. We have a different problem than they have out there in the West. And that's the point I keep trying to make, that we should be able to be more indigenous in our approach to this issue. Rather than copying whatever happens in the West, we try to retrofit it in here. It doesn't work that way. Science doesn't work that way. The science out there is that we have a different response to the COVID issue than the West. And we should explore that further. That is the point I keep making, that we should explore that further. We do have some innate problems. We know that our healthcare system is bad. We know that we don't have good hygiene. We know all those things. But even given that we have fared better, our NCDC have done a good job. Our Ministry of Health has done a good job. We should celebrate those things. And our people also have, as I said, we have had a situation where we are doing better than the most. And the deaths, the stats are there. We are not dying as much as they are dying. We are not being infected as much as they are being infected. So we should be able to look at the stats and be able to see how far we can do better than what we are doing. And as I did mention earlier, in Imo State, just last week, we started distributing immune fortification therapy to our people, older people, people who are vulnerable, and that way we are thinking we can then be able to stand a better chance of surviving both this new variant and more variants that are going to come. Let us not be taken unawares. By this time next year, in their winter, we are going to have other variants coming. The thing to do is for us to be able to be always one step ahead of the virus. Thank you.
Professor Morrison, well, thanks a lot. I would like Professor Nasidi to also respond to this. And of course, in responding to the issue on the table, let's also consider, from your perspective, are we now getting into researching why Africa, and let's say for us here in Nigeria, has not recorded the catastrophic forecast for us? Why has the case of Africa been different?
Well, thank you, Kinsley. The key is that we have history from which to learn from. We shouldn't, as you rightly said, drop our guards. We shouldn't claim victory and think that, oh, it's all over. It's not yet over until it's over. I will just take us back a little bit before I come to the two questions you have. One, if we remember, with the advent of HIV/AIDS, in fact, we are now in the 8th week. Yesterday was the World AIDS Day. AIDS is still there. AIDS is still killing people. When AIDS hits Africa, the first thing they said, oh, it was, it's a disease invented by the Americans, so it's for the Caucasians. It will not affect Africans. And to the extent that my friend, and may so rest in peace, Fela Ransom could even he said, African skin is too thick for the AIDS virus, and that Africa will be free. And for a long time, Africa was not really badly hit by the virus. But when the virus now consolidated, what is the story today? So we shouldn't. Himself died of it. Himself died of it. Now let me even wind forward quickly. That the COVID example. I don't want a situation where people will think, oh yes, we are lucky, and therefore this one will come. Professor Iwu is a very solid pharmacologist. People don't seem to remember this is solid medicine that had a lot of experience in traditional medicine, and I'm very proud of his achievements in terms of doing everything to boost our immunity. That is number one. So either vaccination or through the drugs, the immune boosters that he's promoting is a way to answer that question. But, when COVID came and COVID, started finding its foot a little bit within the continent, and in Nigeria here, many of my friends and colleagues, some professors, some experts, engineers, that keep telling me, don't worry about COVID, it's not real, it's not this. A lot of them died of COVID. A lot of, I'm not here to mention names also, a lot of them died of COVID. Then we had waves. We have evidence of waves in Nigeria where it happened in and around Ogun and Lagos, limited. It happened in Kano, but we got lucky. So it's not yet over. Then what we are saying is, for instance, when Ebola, also that's the last example I will give, when Ebola came up, the same thing happened. Ebola never occurred in West Africa when it was affecting African continent, mostly East and Central Africa. Then when it now occurred in 2014 in West Africa and found a fertile ground, what it did was shocking. People never thought that it could kill so fast and spread so fast, affected so many economies like it did. So in East Africa, it doesn't happen like that. So what are the reasons why Africa is spared? So these are the questions we should start asking scientifically. And at the same time, keep advising our people, it's not yet over. Don't think that Africa is yet fully free. One is that, we are not sure of the behavior of the virus, especially this new one, that Omicron, that has been found, that has mutated 50 times. In fact, the outer coat mutated 30 times. Gamma mutated only 3 times. Delta mutated only 2 times and gave this very, very terrible impact. So this one that is mutating so fast can go either way, as has been mentioned by the previous, especially Professor Wu and Dr. Mukhtar, that it can go either way. It can help us and be like a natural vaccine. Actually, am I right? It might be weak and now immunize all of us. It's very possible. But it can go the other way and start really bringing that prediction that we don't want to hear. So we shouldn't joke. The other point is our temperature, what they are thinking. Maybe our weather, maybe our this, and so on and so forth. It's very possible. In Japan, they found out that ultraviolet is more effective than the hand sanitizer in actually destabilizing the virus. Even if it doesn't kill it, it renders it weak not to transmit. Okay. So, and we have ultraviolet in our sun. Last point is the issue of, research. Who will tell the world why is Africa spared? Should it be Onyibo or foreign researchers who should continue and do fundamental research to actually be able to come out with the result? And up to now, we don't have such strong listen going on. Meanwhile, I will advise Nigerians that we are dealing, we don't panic. We shouldn't never panic. But don't ever think that it is over, or don't ever think Africa is free.
Professor Nasidi, thank you. Just in less than 60 seconds or 2 minutes, I'd like Dr. Mukhtar Mohammed to talk about travel restrictions. Of course, President Muhammadu Buhari and the President of South Africa met at the bi-national meeting and condemned what is going on around the world. But do you think that travel restrictions, or how effective can it be, as a check against the new variant?
So actually, travel restriction is a term recently that has been used to mean different things by different countries. Some people talk of travel ban. And when they say travel ban, they mean, for example, no direct flights. People should not come from particular countries. When they talk of travel ban, they mean people from certain countries should not come to your countries. And again, when you talk of travel ban, your own people are also prevented from going to other countries. For example, when UK had the red list, as a citizen of UK, you cannot go to the countries that are called red list unless you have approval from government. So these are different types of travel bans or restrictions. For Nigeria, yes, we did travel restriction, but our travel restriction was different. And I think that is the type of the travel restriction that people should actually focus on. You look at individuals, not countries. For example, when we restricted India, Turkey, Brazil, and South Africa, what we restricted was that people who are coming from those countries, they have to have waivers before they can come. We never stopped Nigerians from going to South Africa. We never stopped any Nigerian from going to India. You are free to go to these countries, but when you are coming back into our country, into Nigeria, there are protocols that you have to follow. So in that way, it is a restriction. It did not ban the people from going to those countries, and it did not ban the people from those countries also from coming here. We allowed so many businesses to run. Our refinery that is being built, the private refinery that is being built, the fertilizer company, NNPC, and all. Many Indians, many South Africans were Turkish nationals. Turkish Air never stopped flying between Abuja and Lagos, to Istanbul.
Okay,
so
just a last.
So it's a restriction. Let me explain, because it's really different. This thing. So for Nigeria now, these restrictions, what we said is, we don't have any country now that is restricted. However, we have tightened our travel restriction. We put in some measures so that anybody coming into Nigeria will have to comply. And these are tighter measures than the measures we had earlier on. We call them interim measures. Number one, before you come to Nigeria, earlier on is 72 hours. You test for COVID-19 72 hours before you arrive. We have tightened it now. We have reduced it now to 48 hours. Upon arrival, you do all the health screening, but you will do testing, PCR test, on days 2 and also day 7. Earlier on, if you are vaccinated, you will not do day 7. But now everybody will do day 2 and day 7. If you are not vaccinated, you will be required to do home isolation. So this is the changes, and that is the way, we allow economy to continue. We didn't even stop the South African delegation from coming. The South African president himself was here. What we did was we subjected them to this tightened surveillance, and it worked. It helped, because we were able to...
Is there any additional measure of protection, for individual Nigerians, coming from the committee?
Coming from where?
From the PSC.
So these are the measures.
Beyond the face mask, and are there additional measures that you want to put in place?
There are no. These measures I have mentioned mostly related to travel. In addition to this, if somebody is traveling outside the country also, because we have seen how they give your country a bad name to say, for example, oh, this variant was detected in a Nigerian that arrived there. So you'll not be required to do a PCR test, or you show your evidence of vaccination.
All right, Dr. Mukhtar Mohammed, head of the Technical Secretariat of the Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19. We appreciate your participation in our discussion this morning. From Imo State, that's Owerri, I believe, that's the capital. Professor Maurice Uwu, who is chairman of the Imo State Task Force on COVID-19. Once again, we are delighted to have had you as part of our discussion this morning. And from Sokoto Network Center, we were joined by Dr. Haruna Mshelia, who is chairman of the House Committee on COVID-19 and former Commissioner for Health in Borno State. Dr. Mshelia, delighted to have had you on this program this morning. And last but not the least, Professor Abdulsalami Nasidi, former Director General of NCDC, with deep thanks for your being with us as always on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
All right, so next for us now will be